John Matham. Lines are always open on 021 446 0567.
8 minutes past 4. A very good afternoon from John Matham. It's been a difficult day. We've heard some quite extraordinary stories, some really disturbing stories, also some stories of profound hope, and we continue with our focus on rape. On line 2 for me at the moment is Lucy Witts. Hello, Lucy.
Hi, John.
Lucy, there's a mother at some point in your story. There's a biological sister that gets involved. So, just a couple of steps back. How did this happen? How did it unfold?
Well, John, Dragan was my stepfather and raised me until the age of 12. When I was about 19 or so, I heard he was dead until a couple of years ago, and then I heard he was arrested for allegedly raping 4 girls under the age of 10.
I had to speak to him. I wanted to know why and how it had happened. Also, had he loved me? Or was it just about sex? So I travelled to Swakopmund in Namibia and saw him for the first time in 30 years.
When we were one-on-one away from the family. I just wanted to reassure you that my love for you will never ever change, even doesn't matter whatever happens, which is still there. Though it's no longer sexual with me, but I love you as I love you as my child, still, and I always will. Yeah, my name is Dragan Was. I was born in former Yugoslavia, now Serbia. I was a young man when I came to Africa in 1975, January 27, 1975. And most of my life I lived in Namibia. I accept the fact that I've done wrong, but I'm just trying to explain how it came to that. The day when we actually met. You came rushing into the bathroom, and you came straight to the bath, and you were just a little bit higher than a bath, and you looked, and you saw my erected penis that particular time. Then you just wanted to grab it. You were screaming for it. And I was pushing your hands away, and I said, no, it's not right. Then your mother jumped in. She says, no, it's okay. There's nothing wrong. Let her play with it. And that moment was the one that triggered these emotions in me that brought all that things that happened afterwards. The first time we had this sexual contact, so to speak, on a sexual level. And then from there on, it was just unraveling and rolling on towards that direction, which was unexpected for me. I did not think I was going to be on that train, but I got onto that train, and that's how it went. And just keep on rolling and steaming, cuckoo.
And how did it feel to be on that train?
No, it felt great for me.
Your mother, Lucy, I've been getting a lot of emails from women who have been through an enormous amount, and they have been emboldened by the stories they've heard on the radio this week to share their stories with me. They don't want to do so publicly, and some have been abused and raped by a father or a stepfather or a foster father or, a male figure in the home. And one question from all of them is, did my mother know?
But how could I have not known? How could I have not known? It was more that. It was more the... it was just sad. It was the sadness of it all. It was lives you know, what was it all about? What was it all for? It was a waste of lives, waste of time, waste of...
Dragan was an artful manipulator, and he took advantage of my mother's vulnerability, and he saw her coming. From day one, he was very procedural about being my port of call. He was my go-to.
Well, grooming starts with the first of all of recognizing the potential target. Mm-hmm. If you understand, if you predatory terms, it's like a lion watching the gazelles, and now choosing which gazelle is going to be the one who's going to be targeted.
I was not the only one. I had no idea, but Dragan was also molesting my older sister Sophie. Now tilt.
You know, I needed love and I needed someone, and he saw it and he did his damnedest. He knew what was going on with me, he knew what was going on with you and Mum, and he just exploited it within a few months, few weeks. Yeah? He was in my bed within a few weeks, filling my head with all sorts of bullshit nonsense.
Do you think you were groomed?
I was 100% groomed. 100%. From day one, he was caring, he was attentive, he was loving. I'd never experienced that. He knew that I'd never experienced that.
So I was literally working day and night to support you all. You know, I felt that he was always trying to make things better and easier and not so difficult and, you know, supportive. He had a great relationship with you. You know, it was like warm, fun, laughy, playful. I put it down to the fact that I was working, you know, long hours, and Dragan was at home all the time because he was, you know, he was like a handyman. So you didn't want me to cuddle you. You didn't want to sit on my knee. You know, you'd go to Dragan, you wouldn't go to me. I never, ever felt uncomfortable or, you know, that he was sort of touching you inappropriately or playing inappropriately with you or any of those things. I never, ever felt that.
He was the one who'd collect me from school, and he'd watch my school plays. He took an interest in my life. He took an interest in what I was doing daily. And in no time, we became very, very close.
The child has to have some kind of a trust of a person that she or he is involving in any kind of sexual intercourse or sexual play. So I suppose the child is always been preyed upon by a family member or a neighbor or somebody who is known to the children.
Paedophiles don't only go after the child. They may select a vulnerable adult. Paedophiles and sex offenders are adept at spotting the psychosocial vulnerabilities. And so initially, that vulnerable person becomes the gateway to children and to their preferences. So the carer or the partner might see, you know, this child is very attracted to him, she only listens to him or he only listens to the pedophile, and he's the world to that child. And so initially, you know, one says, I'm so glad my child has a good relationship.
One News and Talk Station.
Lucy, there are a lot of memories looking back. Can you isolate in this process the first memory of what's this, what's happening, why is he doing this, why is he saying that? Is there a point at which you now recognize was the beginning of the abuse, beginning of the grooming?
I could actually take it back to the very first time that we met. The very, very, very first time
I couldn't have been more than 2.5 at most. And he engaged in a chess game with me. We were at neighbour and friend's house, and he literally came down to my level. And I remember very distinctly feeling like I was the only person in the world at that moment. He had a charm about him in a way that drew you in.
But it starts with just acting and keeping that person, whatever young person or whatever it is, on the same level. That means not distinguishing the difference with the person. You treat the person as the same as you would treat the grown-up or a child. It's the same thing. So to give it a importance that of that person, right? And then of course shower it with the things that they like or what they want.
People found it strange how we behaved, you know, and the closeness that we had. My mum would have been oblivious to it because she was also groomed to believe that was normal. She was also...
How much did she know?
She didn't know anything.
Nothing.
Absolutely nothing. My mum, you also have to understand...
Absolutely nothing.
Absolutely nothing.
Knew deep down but chose to bury the knowledge because...
No. She definitely didn't know.
It was a shock when I realised, hang on a minute, Lucy's always believed that I knew, you know. It had never occurred to me. It hadn't actually, all these years, never crossed my mind.
From day one until the day that he left, he felt like Dad. It felt like he loved me. It felt positive. It felt loving. It was never. I never ever had that sense of, oh, this is wrong and this is terrible. The first time I felt wrong was with society afterwards. When it actually happened, no, never. I never had that sense of it was wrong. Or
even when he first showed his penis to you, even the first time that he penetrated you digitally, or whatever the case may be, when he did something that from the outside is shockingly inappropriate, when he was doing those things, at no stage did you go, hold on a second, why is my stepfather showing me his penis? No,
and the reason quite simply was because he didn't just show me his penis. There was a whole lot that happened before that. There was a whole lot of normalization of it's okay to walk around naked. It's okay to, to be naked in the house.
But when it happened, you were still very, very young.
It didn't feel wrong because he didn't make it feel wrong. He had made it not terrible. It wasn't. It didn't feel dirty. It really didn't. I didn't have that sense of foreboding.
It basically, what Dragan did was he took the sexual component of me and he made it into a thing. There was no emotional context to go with it because I wasn't mature enough to be able to grasp any kind of emotional context with it. I thought I was at the time, but it was only as I grew older that I realized that I actually had control over my own self, my own body, and I was allowed to say no. I was allowed to say no.
I mean, children don't grow up with words such as abusiveness and exploitation. That's the words that we use as adults. And so the child doesn't construct that experience as being an abusive one.
Because I was attracted to you very much so. You were a very nice child. You were obedient. I just had no problems with you whatsoever, and we didn't have any disputes. You were not naughty or whatever as a child. You were like an extreme good case of a good child, actually. And I treasured you in that way. But unfortunately, I took the advantage of your innocence.
It's the fact that this child makes him feel validated, makes him feel that he's special. And the crossover into a sexual activity is the crazy-making part, both for him and the child. He starts off with an emotional attachment, and then introduces the sexual activity. So you can't separate the two.
It just goes as a feeling, as if you were going to the bar and meeting some person, you just got that attraction too. It's just a natural process of that feeling attracted to the person. It might be 4 or 5 years old, or it could be 70 years old, or whatever. You've got that feeling, so that is it. There's no difference. Similar, the age will be like 7, 8, 9 there, mostly, because those age groups are already sort of one notch more mature than those 3 years. The 3 years olds are still lost, unless they're like a special edition like you. Then there were not so many to find like this. That's 3 years old, that is so mature, and that is so much into that particular thing. Which obviously must have been karmic thing that came, which manifested itself in, without you knowing that. But this is karma, that's what that's all about. Was that I never thought that was nothing that was wrong, because I did not force you to do anything. And I did not make you cry, and I did not make you uncomfortable or bad. You always smiled and you seemed to enjoy it, even maybe that you were maybe faking it, but you were at least not showing any discomfort if I was expressing my sexual desires towards you. And you were always responsive.
And so the pedophile is going to work with that and keep the child believing that this relationship of ours is special, it's consensual, it's a mutual one. There's nothing that's going on in this relationship that you don't want. Both of us desire the same outcomes.
You always played along, willingly, happily, looking. Might not be happy inside, but your face, your actions were showing that you were happy to play along that stupid game. And I find it totally ridiculous and stupid now, but unfortunately that was the main scene at that particular time. Who like, you was 3 years old, but you had all the experience in the world, it's like you've done this before in your life many times, and this is like something you want. That it encourages me to go further, you understand?
It shows absolution, and I'm not involved and I'm not responsible. I gave them what they wanted, which is very much what the paedophile does. That's what.
And that's what he did to you in these conversations that you had with him.
Absolutely.
Refused to acknowledge that he had done you any harm at all.
Oh, absolutely. He takes no responsibility for any of it.
Remember, you're dealing with somebody who has cultivated a game, and that game is steeped in deception, manipulation. So initially we understood grooming to be recruitment, getting the child to comply, and to maintain secrecy. We know better now that grooming is also about removing credibility, presenting himself in a certain light, and getting you to think about yourself, your relationship in a certain way. And so the grooming often starts with grooming the caregiving community, grooming the child's significant support systems before the child is exposed to active, aggressive grooming.
Was it your secret? And did Dragan make that clear to you, that, Lucy, what you and I are doing is our secret?
I can't honestly recall him ever saying, this part of our lives is secret.
I've never asked you in a life once not to tell the story. Never asked you that, because I never needed to tell you that, because it was just like unspoken word.
The pedophile puts a lot of effort into maintaining that sense of normality. And so again, when we come back to grooming, it's the nuances and the strategies that goes into keeping that child silent about certain things.
I never put pressure on you to speak or not to speak. I wanted you to be free and to express your own will and to express your own ways.
He didn't really need to ever say to me, this is our secret, don't ever tell anybody. Further to that, he made himself the person. So if there was a secret to be told, he would have been my go-to. Certainly not my mother. You know, he would have isolated my mother to a point where it wouldn't have been normal or natural for me to go to Mum to tell a secret. It would have been natural to go to Dragan.
I don't remember her being there, Lucy. Other than at night times, I don't remember her being connected. In fact, all of that time, I don't remember Mum ever trying to actually switch on to what was going on. It was like there was some kind of... I don't know what she was doing that wasn't a part of us. I just know that there was it was just disconnected. There was no...
I know it's a selfish thing, and my thoughts should have probably been totally only with you and Sophie, but they weren't. I was trying to process it to be able to deal with everything else.
When last did you talk about that time when Dragan was abusing you?
We've never spoken about it.
Never?
Never. We have
You've
never
never
spoken
confronted that reality?
No, because, interestingly, she always says how the doors are open, you can come and talk about it, but yet they're not.
I never questioned you about what had happened, ever, because that was a decision I also took at the time. Because I know that if me as a young girl, if my mother had come and said to me, well, what did he do? You know, what happened? It would have, I wasn't the person to do that, you know? So I've always left it, that's why I've never asked you. That's why this is the first time that we're speaking. For how many years? We've never spoken about it, ever.
I don't need Mum to unpack it for me to have closure or for me to forgive Mum. Were you dating my mother or were you dating me?
I was dating you. Well, I was dating your mother to start with, and then the relationship turned into relationship with you, which I was then hoping to continue until you become yourself. In other words, I could not run away from you before you were aged at least 18 years old. I was grooming you to be my wife, so to speak. Hopefully that will happen, but it never turned out to be that. That was just a crazy dream.
I was mortified when he said that, because to me, we were never lovers. There was nothing ever loverish or loveresque about us at all. He was my dad. So that was a shock. I didn't feel that I was compliant to it. It just happened. It just was what it was. So to be told that was very painful. You referred to me as having been your lover, okay? You were never my lover. You were my dad. And if I can't even trust my dad, I couldn't trust my mother to protect me, couldn't trust my dad to protect me. It's shattered family, my family, in a way that I can't describe to you. You know, my sister ran away when she was 15, when we left Swakopmund. She's now 45 years old. She's never come back. I haven't seen my sister, okay? And that's because of you.
Are you easily able to say, Dragan, you're lying to me now the way you lied to me and to my mother and to everybody else for that decade where we were entwined?
Just before I arrived home in Cape Town, I could feel myself being drawn back to him. And I was very, very conscious that was the grooming. It was absolutely the grooming.
When somebody's an adult, it's very difficult to extricate themselves from that relationship. So grooming doesn't stop there, it just takes on a different nuance.
All my natural instincts of separating myself from this person who is so horribly wrong and awful, all those instincts were being screamed at by another part of my brain, which is the very deeply, very cleverly, manipulatively groomed part of my brain that was going, no, you need to go back to him and you need to help him and you need to get him through this situation. I mean, it's completely ridiculous.
I've got this situation going on in my head. As I said, it literally did feel like two sides. I could feel two sides of my brain. That's how it felt. One side of me, I was still in love with Dragan. Yeah, I was, you know. I still was in love with him. And then on the other hand, I know all these horrific things that have gone on. And then I was like having this terrible internal mental battle constantly as to how can you possibly love. It just didn't all anymore go, you know? And it was like that drove me insane for a long time.
You know, the caregiving and the pedophilia, there's an overlap. Because for the child that has challenges, that caregiving is invaluable. But it's also the gateway to inappropriate behavior. And that's one of the crazy-making parts for the child. How do I separate what was care and what was offered to me in the name of true love and what was in the service of the sex offense? That's where a lot of the damage comes. Not knowing, you know, did I deserve the love part, or did the sexual activity, was that the more pronounced dynamic here? And that's where, that's the work that these children into adulthood often grapple with. Often the carer feels that I'm the other woman because the little princess is the one that gets all the attention.
The relationship like yours, it never happened in my life again. The longest and the most intense sexual orientation was towards you. The rest were mostly like flashes, just a fling.
What's been the process for you in terms of blaming yourself? I let it happen. I liked it. In those teenage years when Dragan was taken away from you, you missed him emotionally. Did you miss the physical, even though it was abusive and wrong? Did you miss that? Do you blame yourself for missing that?
I haven't really made the link until the very moment that you said that. But actually, yes, I must have. And I know that because I became incredibly sexually promiscuous. But at the time, it felt more as though it was to try and damage myself because I wasn't worthy. And you know, all I was worth was sex. And, you know, the more aggressive and the more hateful, the better, even though that wasn't the case of how it was with Dragan. It was a negative towards myself.
You and I both know that a lot of shit went down after those years with me, because I did not feel that I was worthy of any kind of connection for a long time.
I needed you to perform the sex with me because you always do, and you always there ready for it, whatever I needed, without complaining or moaning.
Lucy, when he says something like that to you, and I know I've listened to you talking about how well he'd groomed you, how natural and normal that seemed, and how wrenching it was for that to be taken away from you when the secret came out just as you were becoming a teenager. But when he says to you things like, you know, I was doing you a favor, is there not a rage that comes over you?
No, I'm quite able to emotionally disconnect. And in that particular moment, as we were sitting down to that interview, I knew that I was going to have to disconnect. So I did. I created a character and disassociated myself from the character. So I don't need to be vengeful and rageful towards him. I genuinely don't believe it helps. I'm not willing to live like that, and I'm not willing to allow him that power over me for me to really feel anything for him. And rage it's quite a strong feeling, and I feel that's just far too much power, yeah.
It's not unusual for an adult survivor to, you know, be protective over her abuser and to start seeing him differently.
I don't believe anybody's listening to the perpetrators, the child molesters, the paedophiles, and the would-be paedophiles. And also not necessarily even the parents.
Why should we listen to them?
Well, because the more we demonize
what they're doing and the way they think, the less likely they are to come forward for support. But if we can somehow allow for support, we can stop it before it happens.
Is he in a sense a product of what happened to him when he was a child, which was a product of what happened to his abuser when he was a child?
One of the myths is that if you've been abused, you will abuse somebody else, and that's a myth. There are many women and many boy children who've been molested and abused that have not molested.
In Dragan's instance, I think he does play into that stereotype.
That was the times when my mother used to leave me alone and then lock us in the room and leave us with no food, nothing, and then go and come back 2 hours later or something like that, in the darkness.
What we do know is that the worldview of that child, if they're born into a life or a support system where they don't have a cushion to land on, that trauma, that unsatisfactory, disadvantageous kind of background is often what contributes to whether they're going to act out or not only sexual abuse.
How does a mother, how does a father, how does a caregiver spot that somebody is circling as a predator?
Prior to meeting Dragan as an adult and prior to asking him the questions that I've asked him, I would have said, it's the one who is, close to the children, skulking around with the children. It's those people. But the truth, if truth be told, it's the people who you would very much least expect. It's the people who are the closest to the children. And can you spot them? No, you absolutely cannot. I'm very sorry. I wish there was a quick, easy fix. No, there isn't. No, you can't spot them. They're more prevalent than I'm even willing to hazard a guess at. But what we can do is be more present as parents.
I think the mothers just have to keep a close eye on the relationship and keep more involved in the things around them, because some are totally ignorant to what is going around them, and that's usually where it happens.
Normalize conversation and normalize that close bond with your own child. Don't ever allow, if you ever feel that somebody is getting closer to your child than you are yourself, then that should be a warning sign to you.
Children do send signals. The problem is that they're not being decoded by their parents properly, because the parents don't have the time to listen to their kids.
The child gets from the paedophile what they're not getting elsewhere. And yes, sometimes the paedophile will create that circumstance, but the paedophile selects the child by observing and realizing that child's not getting what they need. And that does not, I'm not for one instant suggesting that every child that has ever been under the hands of a paedophile's parents are negligent. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying we can't ever be vigilant enough. And the only way that you can protect your child is by having that very close, open communication with your children. Why? Because the paedophile's not going to target them if they know that they are very close to their parents or they are very close to their caregivers, because they run the risk of being caught out. If you have a suspicion, it's your duty to contact the police or social workers to investigate that. Yes, maybe nothing ends up being there, and there are ways and means of doing that anonymously. You don't have to destroy a family or accuse anybody of anything. But to do nothing is a crime.
So my advice to the carer, to the partner, is don't make decisions at the point of discovery unless you have the support of a good therapist. Because any decision you make at that point is colored, and it's tainted by the way the pedophile partner wanted you to see the world. So it's not a good idea. Any decision you make at that point on your own is going to have repercussions.
We were sitting on her bed. She had a purple cover on her bed. and the room was quite sort of dark. And I remember her holding me and crying with me, and I remember just feeling shame because I didn't know that I should be ashamed. I did, but I didn't, you know? I felt, I don't know, Lucy. I just felt like, how could I just let it happen?
When the child is split from the paedophile, keep in mind that that paedophile is the person that child most trusts in this planet and has the closest relationship with, because the paedophile has facilitated it to be so and has created that relationship. So some cognizance in mind needs to be allowed for the space for that child and that paedophile to dissolve that relationship in a natural way.
No,
yes, it needs to be.
No.
But
No, it's an absurd notion, Lucy.
yeah.
That somebody who has done something as indefensible as groom and sexually abuse a child for 10 years between the ages of 2 and 12, that person should be allowed a separation, a managed separation from that child.
Don't think about it from the pedophile's perspective. What about the victim? What about that child who has the parent, the father, the brother, the uncle, whoever it is that they're so close to, ripped out of their life from one moment to the next? You have questions that you need answered. You know, there are things that come up that you need to have a facilitated process.
With your abuser.
With your abuser.
You're suggesting that a 12-year-old
absolutely
should be allowed to sit in a room with the adult who's abused her for 10 years.
John, the first time that the word abuse was associated with my experience was after The Secret had come out. While it was happening, it wasn't abusive. It never felt abusive to me.
It might not have felt abusive, but it was abusive.
Absolutely it was, but the child at 12 does not know that.
The child experiences this person as a loving, caring, attentive individual. And we miss this when we intervene. We go in, we tell the child, we're going to make him pay, we're going to put him into prison. And for the child, that's very frightening.
It feels like a second form of abuse when that person is just ripped away from the child. There needs to be a pause moment. And right now, I don't believe that we necessarily, in that moment when that's happening to your child, all you want to do is just react. There needs to just be a moment of pause. That's all I'm saying. Just a pause moment to consider all the people and all the relationships that are involved in this, because it's so multifaceted and there are so many layers to it, and it's not all about sex. Yes, sex is a big part of it, but it's so much more than that. That it just needs a pause moment where we can consider, okay, actually, who's going to be influenced here?
Yeah, throughout this, I'm asking you questions, I'm listening to your answers, but I'm also kind of somehow up there watching this and thinking, can this really be true, that somebody whose early life and the fabric of that early life ripped apart in the way that early childhood is not supposed to be ripped apart, can it really be that you are as sanguine, that you are as through this as you say you are? And increasingly, as I listen to your answers, I have to say, you know what, she is. That all the stories I've heard about the lasting damage that is done by these kinds of relationships and the lifelong inability of many survivors of this kind of abuse to get over it, the way it constantly reinserts itself into a dysfunctional pattern of life, the inability to love and to allow yourself to be loved in an appropriate way. You really do. You really do seem to have made the journey from abuse to survival to emotional health work for yourself.
I do, but John, I pay a lot of attention to it, and I'm very conscious of it, and I live quite consciously in that sense. So, for example, I know that my perspectives are quite skew. I know that. I know that my sense of right and wrong needs to be checked. And I'm just very, very lucky to have the husband I have. Would I have been a different me if I had never met Dragan? Well, I don't know that. All I know is what we have today, and I do get to choose how today is going to be. And today is a good day, you know, and hopefully tomorrow will be too. Do you think the right thing for me to do would be to follow through with the justice and in the crime sense of the word?
Well, look, the justice has to prevail because for one particular reason, because it will never put the end to this story. That means the justice has to take its turn, and that's why I decided to stop running away from my shadow.
Do you think that I deserve justice?
Of course you do. You're the first one and the most important one in this matter, and from all of them. So that's why I'm here, for you to express that and to tell you how I feel and how I felt then and how I feel now, and see if we can resolve this issue and forgive each other.
Yes.
Well, I mean, I've forgiven you for anything, but I mean, if you can forgive me.
Currently, Dragan's out on bail awaiting trial for his charges of rape. We'll see how that goes.
Lucy, I mean, this has been... it's been absolutely extraordinary. So engrossing listening to you tell your story, and tell your story with such equanimity. So thank you very, very much.